as she gives this message, last testimony. Father, I just pray that she hears you while she's speaking your word, Father, that she continues to hear. Lord, we just speak confidence into Crystal. Lord, we speak just wisdom to flow out of her. Lord, we just pray for ears to hear tonight, Father. Lord, whether it be over Facebook or in this building. Lord, we just pray that a revelation just hits someone as Crystal releases what's inside of her today. Lord, we just pray that that pain just peel off, just like many layers of an onion. And that pain to just fall down like a brick wall, Father. So we can let you in. Because, Lord, you are a loving Father. You will not force yourself. But you ask us. You are a jealous God. You want us to be with you and to know more about you. Lord, we love you. In Jesus' name, amen.
For the record, everybody in here heard that, right? I, Crystal Furr, the wife, just told her husband, Mark Furr, that he is in charge.
I didn't even hear that.
Good of me?
I didn't hear that.
I didn't hear that. You guys are
Didn't say for how long.
Hey, it counts. I'm a wife. I'm submitting to my husband. I didn't hear you.
It was a joke.
Okay, that's probably good. I didn't hear you. How is everybody? How is you folks? I love it. Well, boys and girls, time for part 2. Are we ready? If you were not here Sunday and missed part 1, I'm going to go through and just read you steps 1, 2, and 3 real fast, but the video is on YouTube and it's also on Facebook. Technology. No pressure when you're up here from that, I promise. It's no pressure. Yeah. Okay, so we were talking about processing through the different types of emotional pain that you have in your lives. And I was sharing with you the process to how I've overcome a lot of the pain that I've had in my life. And step number 1 was to be honest with yourself and with what has happened in your life. And in that I shared about how the Lord led me to write my life story out. And in the process of doing that, how I received so much healing just from having that time where I stopped and I faced the reality of my past and of my pain. And then I dealt with it. And so step 2 was be honest and open with what you're feeling. And in that we talked about how it's really not good for us to leave emotional pain and torment in our soul. And how we need to have a safe and a godly way to be able to release what we're really feeling. And number 1, that's to Jesus and through prayer. And number 2, it's to your pastor or your Christian friends who specifically aren't struggling with the same area of pain that you're struggling with. That's important. And then number 3 was discovering the source of your pain, which that's a good one. And we talked about in there about how it's always good to talk to your own souls and how David talked to his soul. And we talked about how certain feelings and emotions like anger and rage tend to be the ones that are on display when we're in emotional pain, but that's not really the root of what we're feeling in the moment. And the example of that was you can be afraid or vulnerable. And instead of expressing that vulnerability, you're expressing a rage and anger. I tried to make a new word, ranger. There you guys go. Oh, Lord. So that catches you guys up, all right? Okay, so let's get into this. Step number 4. You guys know that teacher likes you to say it with her, so boom, ready, go. Have a plan for your pain. So you have to have a plan for your pain. Now let's see how many of us have believed this. Because one of the greatest misconceptions when it comes to pain is that time heals it. Time heals all wounds, right? Anybody ever thought that? Time heals all wounds. That's kind of like saying if you just stuff your feelings and you ignore what happened, then it's just going to go away all by itself. And so we're going to take a look at Matthew 5:4. Blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted. So mourning is the actual process of healing for pain in your life. So the actual process of working through pain and becoming a whole person is the process of, like we talked about in step 1, acknowledging your pain and then mourning it. Does that make sense? I know everyone gets excited over the prospect of mourning, right? Now the challenge to that is that there's probably not a single person in here that likes to sit around and think about all the painful stuff that's ever happened to you, right? Right. Most of the time, just focusing on pain in our lives seems to make it so much worse than it really is. Can anybody relate to that? Yes. So our typical response to pain is to live in a state of denial or to ignore it. However, according to Matthew 5:4, without the process of mourning, there is no comfort in our lives. Good. So the healthy way to mourn your pain, and this is important, it requires a beginning and it requires an end. That's an important step. Now the challenge here is that we have to learn to steward each painful memory and thought that we have. And if we can just start to look at that as a gift instead of a curse, because every processed painful memory that you have in your life that you give to Jesus and that you overcome, that's one more step in your journey to freedom. Isn't that good?
Yes.
We never think about it that way, do we? Well, I never thought about it that way. So let's look at a couple of scriptures here. We're going to look at Psalms chapter 30, verse 5. Now we're going to look at the second part of that, but I'll read it all. For his anger is but for a moment. Is anybody thankful for that? His anger is just for a moment. His favor is for life. Say, God's favor is for life. Okay, that's good. Weeping may endure for a night, but joy comes in the morning. Weeping may endure for a night, but joy comes in the morning. So what that's saying is that you have to mourn your way back to joy. Did you ever think about it that way before? So now we're going to look at Psalms 126:5. Those who sow in tears shall reap in joy. Doesn't that sound like fun? Those who sow in tears shall reap in joy. But check this out. God created in each one of us the ability to cry. Because he knew that we would need some way of being able to purge the pain that we're feeling. If we don't allow ourselves the right to get out what's on the inside, it's going to harden our hearts. And then before we know it, we're going to be overcome by bitterness. Can anybody relate to that? Like, you know you're upset and you just need to cry, but you just won't let yourself? Does that lead somewhere good? No. But when you do cry, how about this? I feel so much better now that I cry. Anybody? Fix me then. What's the matter? Is it fixed?
Yeah, speak louder.
Speak louder. Okay, I'm scared. Okay, so nobody wants to have our hearts hardened and nobody wants to end up bitter, right? So here's some questions. If you've never been able to show your emotions, ask yourself what you think is going to happen if you start to show your emotions. If you've always been angry or gone into fits of rage, ask yourself what you believe is going to happen if you lay down that anger. If you've never been able to express or say the words, I love you, to the people that you care most about in life, ask yourself what you believe will happen if you express love to those people. If you get into this habit of asking yourself these questions, chances are that you're going to start to find out why you are the way you are and why you believe the things that you believe. Does that make sense? Yeah? Okay, so we're going to look at Ecclesiastes chapter 3. And I just want to recommend to you guys, if you're home and you're reading and you're studying, read Ecclesiastes 3, because there's so much wisdom for us to glean out of that. But for the purposes of the process of pain, we're going to look at 2 verses. And so verse 1, to everything. Everyone say everything. Everything. You guys are awesome. To everything, there is a season, a time for every purpose under heaven. Now, if you go down and look at verse 4, it says, there's a time to weep, there's a time to laugh, there's a time to mourn, and there's a time to dance. There's a time for every season. So this is going to be, if you guys remember, we had personal recommendation 1 and personal recommendation 2 on Sunday. So this is personal recommendation number 3. You guys ready? Allow yourself the release of having a good cry about the painful stuff that's happened in your past that you've never cried about before. There, you guys ready? So while I was reading this and studying this, I told you guys Sunday that there were some things that happened during this process, things that the Lord showed me that were new things that I'd never known before. And then during this process, there were other things where He would bring back memories to me of things that had happened in my life. And He would say, this is why that thing happened in your life. And so I'm going to share a testimony now of one of those things that He brought back to my memory and that He explained to me. And now I understand why that happened. So, if you guys remember on Sunday, I was talking about the brown lockbox that I sat here. Does everybody remember? Inside that lockbox, I had lots of different things, and in case you weren't here, I'll just tell you real fast. There was a day where the Lord said to me, you have parts of your heart frozen from Him. And I said, well, how do I do that? And He showed me this brown lockbox that I own. And so I went into storage, and I brought it out, and I unlocked it, I opened the lid, and there was all kinds of stuff in there. And some of the stuff was, I had letters that my mother wrote me, and she's passed away now. And I had stuff that belonged to my grandparents in there, and they're passed away now. And I had things notes that my ex-husband had written me. And so while I was going through this box, it became really clear to me that I had little things that symbolized all the painful stuff in my life. And I had kept them and put them in this box and locked it up and put it away in storage. And so I wasn't dealing with that pain. And so there was an evening, I'm bad with time, it was before Mark and I were married. We've been married 7 years, so I'm going to say 8 or 9 years ago. There was an evening where I wanted to get something out of that brown lockbox that belonged to my grandfather. And so I went to storage and I unlocked it and I opened it up. And the very first thing that was on the top of this lockbox was an ultrasound picture. And if you remember on Sunday, I told you guys how sometimes we become blind to the sight of some things in our life because when you see them, it makes you remember pain. Well, this was one of those things in my life that I had become blind to. And so I opened the lid that day and I saw that ultrasound photo. And when I looked at it, I just lost it. And I started crying and crying and crying and crying. And the thing with that ultrasound photo was, it was the photo that I had taken the morning before I aborted that baby. That was hard. So you see, this was the first time that I cried over that. Because during that time in my life, I thought I'd never let myself connect to that baby. Because there was all kinds of stuff going on in my life, and being pregnant was something that was happening to me. And so I really never let it connect to my heart, or that's what I thought. And so I made that choice because at that time in my life, I thought that was the only choice that I had. And now, a couple of years later, I got saved. And this was one of the first things that I repented of, was murdering my baby. Sorry, not sorry. But I received the Lord's forgiveness. And He had cleansed me of my shame from that choice I made that day. But there was something that was still missing in my life. And that something was having peace. And so this night that I opened that box, and the very first thing I saw was the picture of that baby. And I cried and I cried and I cried. This was the very first time that I'd ever mourned the loss of that baby. Now, all those feelings that I have bottled up, that I pushed down, that I didn't want to let myself feel, all the thoughts and the imaginations that I had about what she would have looked like, who she would have been, if I hadn't made that choice that one day. I felt and experienced all that night when I was mourning. Sorry. I missed it. And this is something that my heart's very passionate about. So I know that there are some people in here that aren't going to like this. Because I know that this is one of those hot topics in the church. But I'm here to tell you that there are women all over the place that are broken, that are shattered, that are living in self-hate and self-disgust because they have made that very choice in their lives. And there are men all over the place that have helped that woman in their life make that choice. And these people are living in a jail cell of their shame. And they need to know that the cross of Christ isn't just for the drug addicts. And they need to know that the cross of Christ isn't just for the adulterers. And they need to know that the cross of Christ isn't just for the normal people in society. They need to know that He is here for them. They need to know that He loves them and that they can find forgiveness and healing in Him. And that they need to know that they can walk into a church and they can find love and compassion and not judgment and hate. And so this is just my side note, because I'm really passionate about this, because I will tell you, I was one of those girls, and we don't do this here, I'm not saying that we do, but I was one of those girls who was in the car on Grand Central driving by the people that are picketing with their signs about abortion. I was one of the girls that was in the car and saw those signs and thought, that's the church, and it could never be safe for me to go there because I had one. We have to be careful about what we say on Facebook and what we're doing with our actions, because it's sending a message to the very people that Jesus wants to reach that they aren't welcome here. That's my rant, I'm sorry. So this is what happened. That night that I was crying, the Lord's comfort walked right into my life that night. And I want to share with you exactly what that looked like. Because this is how kind and merciful my God is, your God is, our Jesus is. Now there's not a single person on this earth that could ever convince me or take away from me what the Lord imparted to me that night that I was crying. And this is what His comfort took the form of. A little girl in heaven that I know I'm going to meet there one day. So all that torment that I had lived with, all that pain that I had lived with, about what would she have done with her life, whose life could she have changed if I hadn't made that one decision that day. It was all gone. And that's the power of Matthew 5:4. Blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted. So do it again, Daddy. That was hard. I love you guys. Okay, so just to add to this a little bit, if you had to have a step 4/B, this would be it. And that's move on. There's a time for every season under heaven. There's a time to weep. There's a time to cry. There's a time to laugh. There's a time to dance. Don't get stuck in making a season of mourning in your life into your lifestyle of pain. Don't get stuck there. There comes a time where you just have to get up. You have to put your shoes on. You have to put one foot in front of the other, and you have to move on with your life. There comes a time to move on. And so I just want to share with you, now we can't put it up here because we don't have the Passion Translation yet, but it's coming. But I was reading in the Passion Translation, and I want to read to you 1 Timothy chapter 1, verses 18 and 19. Now it says, so Timothy, my son, but you put your name in here. So I'm going to put mine. So Crystal, my daughter, I am entrusting you with this responsibility in keeping with the very first prophecies that were spoken over your life and are now in the process of fulfillment in this great work of ministry. Continue to use your prophecies as weapons as you wage spiritual warfare by faith and with a clean conscience. Now, I liked that translation and that verse so much because that's saying, recount the prophecies that have been spoken over your life. If there's a day where, if you've been in a season of mourning, and there's a day where you wake up and you have the thought, I need to get up and move on today, and then almost immediately your feelings come in and say, I don't want to, right then and there, you recount those prophecies that are spoken over your life. You recount them. You don't think you have any prophecies spoken over your life? Open the Bible and read almost anywhere. I am chosen. I am called. I have destiny. I have purpose. I am a minister of reconciliation. I am the apple of God's eye. There's some for you if you need some. Now, you do that. Then you recount the testimonies. Everybody in here has testimonies of what God's done in your life. Recount the prophecies. Recount the testimonies. Take those weapons, get up, and move on with your life. That wasn't mean, was it? Okay, I love you guys. Okay, so we're moving on to step number 5. Is everybody okay? Ready, go. Learn the truth. So what's the biblical truth about your inner pain? What's the biblical truth about your brokenness? Proverbs 17:22 says, a merry heart does good, like medicine, but a broken spirit dries the bones. That word broken means wounded. So a wounded spirit dries the bones. Psalms 34:18 says this, the Lord is near to those who have a broken heart, and saves such as have a contrite spirit. Contrite is crushed. The Lord is near to those who have a broken heart. And Psalms 147:3 says, he heals the brokenhearted and binds up their wounds. So here's my question. Does that sound like the Lord's heart towards us is that we would remain in emotional pain for the rest of our lives? No. Now, aren't we thankful for that? He doesn't want us to remain in brokenness. So this is a little excerpt that I read from a pastor's wife on a blog that she had, and I thought she worded it so beautifully that there's no way I could do it any better. So I'm just going to share it with you real fast. Get this hair out of the microphone. To us, broken things are despised as worthless. But God can take what has been broken and remake it into something better. Something that He can use for His glory. Broken, shattered, cast aside, or thrown away. It takes too much work to try to repair things. Just get a new one, is what the mindset of our culture says. Don't let anyone see the broken flaws in our lives. That's reality in the way we often live in this world. With our broken families, with our broken marriages, with our broken relationships, with our broken dreams, and with our broken lives. We feel the need to hide the scars. We feel like the brokenness has rendered us useless in life. We feel beyond repair this time. We feel tossed aside, forgotten, and rejected. Yet God breaks through all that mess. You are never beyond healing. You are never too broken for restoration. You are never too shattered for repair. So don't be afraid of your scars, of the deep crevices that line your souls, or of the broken places of your life. Each of them have an amazing story to tell. Wasn't that good? I thought it was really good. So here's the truth. Just because we've been broken doesn't mean that we're thrown away. Just because we've been broken doesn't mean that we're unusable. Just because we've been broken doesn't mean that we're forgotten. The scars of life, the healed wounds, they all have stories to tell. Now, often we try to hide them away, preferring instead to present to the world a safe facade of who we are, like a more perfect version of ourselves. It's too hard to risk the real vulnerability of exposing what once was, or even what still is in our lives. We have a healer, and our healer is one who repairs. He's one who can fit the broken pieces that no longer seem to fit right together anymore into a perfect design. He makes all things beautiful, especially in the broken. And he does it all from his grace. You are not just simply patched back together. This is important because the truth is that your repair and your healing, they were never intended to be invisible. They were intended to be beautifully lined with his shining grace through every scar and every broken space in our lives. No more hiding them, guys. And that is what his story is really all about, isn't it? Bringing life to what was broken. Our Jesus, he was willing to take on the brokenness of the world in exchange for our freedom. That's our Jesus. So Vicki, if you wouldn't mind putting that picture up. I'm probably going to say this wrong, but this is a picture of something called kintsugi. This is so cool. I know I said it wrong. Sorry, Facebook. Yeah. Now, what that is it's a Japanese method for repairing broken ceramics with a special lacquer mixed with gold, silver, or platinum. Isn't that cool? The philosophy behind this technique is to recognize the history of the object and to visibly incorporate the repair into the new piece instead of covering it up or disguising it. The process usually results in something more beautiful than the original ever was. The kintsugi method conveys a philosophy not of replacement, but of awe, reverence, and restoration. The gold-filled cracks of a once broken item are a testament to the item's history. Isn't that cool? So cool. Thank you, Vicki. So, okay, here's the truth. You don't have to carry your pain for the rest of your life. Did you know that? Now you do. You don't have to carry your pain for the rest of your life. You don't have to remain a broken person. You have a Savior, think about this, who wants to pour his healing blood into your every crack and crevice of the emotional pain that's in your life. Hallelujah. So I just want to, in closing today, just repetition, I can't help it. The 5 steps one more time that have helped me. Step 1 was be honest with yourself and with what has happened in your life. Step 2 was be honest and open with what you're feeling. Step 3 was discover the source of your pain. Step 4 was have a plan for your pain. And step 5 was learn the truth. So I really hope that they help you guys. And so if you, this is it. Here we go. I'm just going to close. Ready? Go. So I tried to be very obedient. And there were very specific parts of my testimony that the Lord said, I want you to share this and this and this. But it was kind of hard, especially tonight. And so, but yay, I did it. I never came to do this. So yeah. And so because of that, I've made myself really vulnerable to you guys on the Facebook Live. That's always fun. But the thing is, like, I know that I've shared some of the most painful things that were ever done to me in my life. And I know that I've also shared some of the most painful things that I ever did. But the thing is, for every vulnerability that I've shared with you guys, for every painful thing that's ever happened in my life, for every bit of brokenness that I had in my life, I can also show you Jesus Christ. And I can show you his power to save, to heal, and to deliver. He's good. And so this is what the Lord told me about my testimony. Which is, you know, this life that belongs to me, these testimonies, they're not really mine. They belong to the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords. And the testimony of Jesus is the spirit of prophecy. So I just speak that over all of you tonight. That whatever the pain is that you've done it with in your life, that whatever you've gone through, that your Savior is more than willing and big enough to come in and deliver you and heal you and set you free and turn that mess into a message.
Amen.
And so, in closing today, I just want to ask you guys, when you look at me, or maybe when you looked at me before tonight, I don't know. When you look at me, do you see every sin that I've committed? Do you see every bad choice that I ever made? Do you see every bad thing I ever did? Do you see every trauma I've ever been through? As I stood before that cross, as I looked into his eyes, as I heard him say, give that thing to me, and as I surrendered it. Now when you look at me, you don't see that. But if you look really closely right there, all of it's there. And that's not just for me. That's available for you too. So you can shut me off now.